Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very much as always for taking the time to tune in to today's episode. And today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by CEO of the Next Level University, Alan Lazaros, who is here to discuss his life journey that led him towards personal growth, business and entrepreneurship. In his mid-20s, Alan was involved in a life-changing incident, an accident that ultimately had him questioning everything he was doing in his life, and by his own admission was at an all-time low, and we'll get into a wee bit about that later. But filled with regret, he searched for answers and found two of the brightest lights that he had ever seen. The first one was a book by Bronnie Ware entitled The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and the second one was a TED Talk by Mr. Tony Robbins. And both of these resources helped him find his way and guide him to make the choice of going all in on self-improvement to design a life of meaning and purpose. And today, Alan is proud to say that it is his mission to help others create a life full of both success and fulfillment. Now, one of the key things that we'll talk about today on the self-improvement journey is that Alan fully subscribes to, has learned and teaches a heart-driven but no BS approach to inspiring, motivating and educating others in what it really takes to get to the next level. And the reason I emphasise that part is this might sound somewhat familiar to you, as I had Alan's business partner, Kevin Palmieri, on the show for episode 5 way back in the day. So there may be some overlap there, but I don't think it's going to be unwanted duplication. I think we're going to get into a little bit more of Alan's take on that as we go forward. Alan, thank you very, very much for coming on the show today.
Gary, thank you for having me, man. The Best You podcast, that is super aligned. You and I talked offline to make sure this was aligned. And if you're out there watching or listening, anyone out there who is super into self-improvement, if you're humble and you have work ethic and you really want to work on yourself to become the best you, obviously you do, otherwise you wouldn't listen to the Best You podcast, then we're going to get along just fine. And I'm very, very grateful to be here, honestly, because there's nothing I'd rather talk about than trying to become the best version of yourself.
Excellent. Fantastic. So I did a wee bit of a brief overview in terms of the bio, but can you tell the listeners a little bit about your life story, as I just kind of hit the highlights and there's some genuine, real impactful stuff here?
Yeah, so absolutely. And I am both challenged and excited because let me ask you this. I'm going to be 36 in November, and I want to try to condense 35 years into a certain chunk of time here. Do you want the short version? Do you want the mid version? Or do you want the long version?
I say we go for the mid version.
Mid version. Okay. You might regret that. I'm kidding. Okay. So the first thing to understand before I ever tell my story. So I started listening to podcasts 9 years ago, and they really helped me sort of reorchestrate my life in a more positive direction. I got in a tough car accident, sort of faced mortality. I'm going to get into that. But that's when I found self-improvement. And I heard these speakers like a Tony Robbins or whoever. And on these podcasts, they sounded like they had it all figured out. And I always told myself that when I get to that level, I'm not at that level, but I'm on my way. I'm going to make it clear as possible that I'm still unpacking my story now. And yeah, I'm Alan version 3.5. And Alan version 3.5 understands his story much better than Alan version 3.0 or 1.5.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand any of this at the time. I understand my own life more and more and more as I go. So if you're out there and you're thinking, wow, that seems to have orchestrated very nicely, trust me, it was a mess. Sometimes it was a nightmare trying to chase my dreams. So I want to make that as clear as possible. It's like when you're a kid and you see a movie. I saw Finding Nemo way back when I was a kid. I rode my bike to the movie theater, and I rewatched it as an adult, and now as an adult I realize, okay, that joke got it, that joke got it, that joke got it. Whereas as a kid, right, the movie didn't change, I changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So rewatching the movie of my own life, here's how it sort of played out from my current awareness. And also I'm going to give this disclaimer. So you had interviewed Kev, and it definitely will be different. So he and I started doing this thing where I started saying, disclaimer, I'm an engineer. And he thinks that gives me permission to now be a dick, when in reality, he's being playful. When in reality, I'm an engineer, so I think in numbers, and so everything's going to be numbers and formulas and statistics. So just brace yourself for that. I need that permission slip. All right, so when I was 2 years old, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28. I had an older sister who was 6, mother who was 31, stay-at-home mom. From age 3 to 14, like I said, everything's numbers to me. From age 3 to 14, I had a stepfather named Steve Lazaros. So my real last name is actually McCorkle. He was from a big Irish Catholic family. So it was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. 6 kids, all J.
Yeah.
And in Massachusetts. So I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I don't have quite as thick of an accent as you do, Gary.
I don't have an accent.
What did you say?
I don't have an accent.
You have a Scottish accent for sure.
I've sounded the same my whole life. You just listen funny. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It depends who you're talking to, right? Yeah. You funny. But anyways, so my real last name is actually McCorkle. I took on my stepfather's last name around age 7. And I playfully refer to age 3 to 14 when my stepdad was around as Boats and BS. So this was mid to late 90s, early 2000s, dot-com bubble. He worked for a company called AGFA. They did hospital computers. And in the 90s, particularly in the US, but really globally, the economy was wild. I mean, it seemed like everybody had money. And my mom and stepdad, they loved to party, and they did not get along, and that's a polite way to put it. And so they surrounded themselves with other people who liked to party. And so they had what I call a pleasure-centered paradigm. The point of life is to have as much fun as possible. And I now realize the downside of that paradigm. Now, I want to make this very clear. There was some really cool stuff about my childhood, but most of it was super challenging. So, Boats and BS, we had a yacht. It was ski trips and boats and deep sea fishing, and we had snowmobiles, and my stepfather had a motorcycle. And my mom drove a BMW, and we had trucks, and we grew up on a small pond, big lake, or small lake, big pond. And so it was a lot of adventure. It was a lot of running amok. And it was the 90s when everyone in the U.S., not everyone, but the U.S. economy was just booming. And my stepfather left when I was 14. He got the yacht and the apartment building. We got the house and the dog. And he took his entire extended family with him. So he also took 90% of the income with him. So I went from, boats and ski trips to now I get free lunch at school because our income is so low. And I'm shopping at Salvation Army. We're not going to starve by any means. My mom trades in her BMW for a little Honda Civic type of thing. And I go from, I hope I get into college. My dream was to go to WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I wanted to be an engineer. And WPI is like a mini MIT. It was $50,000 a year, and this is back then.
Right.
One of the best engineering colleges in the world. My uncle Merle was the track and field coach there. So we don't associate much with the McCorkles anymore because we're trying to be the Lazaroses. The Lazaroses leave. Haven't seen or spoken to any of them since.
Yeah.
That same year, 14, hardest year of my life. Didn't know this at the time, but now it's clear. Sister moves out with her older boyfriend. Understandable. Mom gets in a fight with my Aunt Sandy, and my Aunt Sandy sort of ostracizes us from that side of the family. So by the time I'm 14, I kind of lost 3 families, which created some serious abandonment challenges. So there's 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So I didn't know about fawn, but that's definitely the one I chose socially. So I became this sort of social chameleon, sort of coward, who would be what other people needed unconsciously just because I was afraid of being abandoned. So I held on very closely to my friends and family after that. Yeah. Which is understandable, but definitely caused some problems. But behind the scenes, when no one was watching, it was fight. It was aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Aim higher, work harder, get smarter. I became this super achiever, crazy driven, prove myself guy. Yeah. And, I look at the past, it was painful. The present's painful. You look into the future because that's where you need to go, okay? You look into the future, okay, no dad, no generational wealth, no trust fund. Like, if it's going to be, it's up to me. Yeah. So I bootstrap through all of high school. I get straight A's. I get what's called the President's Award. It's behind me, signed by George W. Bush. Nice. And it basically means you get a 95 or above GPA for every report card for all of high school. So that's 16 report cards straight. I get into WPI. I get a bunch of scholarships and financial aid. And I get to go. And I get my computer engineering bachelor's, graduate with high distinction. I get my master's in business, and then it's off to the races. And I was used to being a broke high school and college student. I didn't have any money in high school and college, really. Not none, but very, very little. Yeah. And so I don't need much. So now I'm in my early 20s, early to mid 20s. I'm dating a woman named Courtney. We live on a lake. My rent is $500. I have no kids. I have no mortgage. And I'm making now, I went from 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, 125 up to 180 just in corporate different tech companies. Sensata Technologies, iRobot, Oz Development, Lens Americas, Tyco Safety Products, all these different companies. I eventually landed at a company called Cognex. Cognex sells industrial automation equipment into manufacturing facilities all across the world. They do machine vision. And I was an inside sales engineer, and then I got promoted to outside sales. My territory was Vermont, Western Mass, and Connecticut. And now I'm in my mid-20s. I'm like 24, 25, and this is post-2008. So 2011, I graduated my bachelor's. 2012, I graduated my master's. 2013, 14, and 15 was just economic boom times. Yeah. Again, after '08. And I'm 21st century computer engineer with an MBA combo, so I'm just super sought after. Mm. Did very well. Paid off $84,000 worth of college debt in a single year. Put $150,000 in an investment account in Vanguard. And I don't need much because I learned how to go without for so long. So it was just get wealthy. That was my goal. Just get wealthy. Yeah. And it was working. But I was still partying too much. High school friends, college friends, corporate friends. I brought my high school friends to college, my college friends to corporate. I literally had a referral program at Cognex where I brought 4 or 5 individuals from college to that company. And I got big bonuses for that. Now I'm in my mid-20s. I'm up in New Hampshire with my little cousin. There's only 2 individuals from my mother's side that I've ever seen since, that have ever really come back into my life. One of them's name is Jeff. He has a son named Dan, my second cousin. He's in the car with me. This is 2015, dark winter night, playing Call of Duty. We're going to TGI Fridays. We're not drinking or partying or anything. I'm supposed to yield, and I don't. The snowbank is covering the yield sign. Mm. I end up on the wrong side of the road, and I look up in front of me, and I see what I thought was a Mack truck. Brightest lights I'd ever seen. Right in front of me. 2 things saved my life. Number 1, it was not a Mack truck. It was a lift-kitted pickup truck. A lot of those up in New Hampshire. Second thing that saved my life is thank you, Volkswagen. I drove this car. I bought it, 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I bought it for $5,000 cash because I just love saving money and building wealth. Yeah. And I knew what tech companies would win, so I wanted to invest it all. And I used to call that car the Tank. German engineered steel trap of a car, super heavy set car. The whole entire front end was completely smashed in, but the frame stayed and everyone was okay. And obviously the person in the truck was way up above, so they were okay too. So everyone was physically okay. My cousin and I, so both airbags deployed. My cousin hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face on the airbag, but physically we're okay. Mm. Definitely rattled, but okay. Mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, however, this is the second chance my dad never got. Yeah. So I'm 26 at the time. My dad died in a car at 28. And so this is my quarter life existential crisis. This is me questioning every decision I've ever made. Who am I? Why am I doing this? What was it all for? Regret? What was the deal? Yeah. And now in hindsight, this is very clear. And this is kind of I'll sum up with this. I didn't understand this at the time, but it's almost 10 years later now. I'm going to be 36 in November, which is this month. So I'm going to be 36 this month, which is 10 years ago. I was 26 when this car accident happened. It's very obvious to me now, having coached so many people. I have 27 people on my roster that I coach currently, hundreds over the years. I started mentoring 10 years ago, coaching 8 years ago. And when you do all these sessions, you realize there's certain common things. And these are the 4 buckets that I think everyone goes through, just maybe in different order and at different times. The first bucket is you're unfulfilled internally and unsuccessful externally. When I was 14, I was a cart kid and a busboy. My stepdad left. People would say, oh, these are the best years of your life, high school. And I remember thinking, God, I hope not.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking too, like, that can't be true. There's no way that that's true. Maybe it's true for you, but hopefully that's not true. And it wasn't, by the way. That's absolute nonsense. Yeah. It's like the worst years of my life. But anyway, so unfulfilled and unsuccessful. Everybody starts there. Some people are still there. If you're there, there's hope. Yeah. The next bucket is I'm externally successful, but I'm internally unfulfilled. Almost $200,000 a year. I'm a 1% global earner. I've got $150,000 in an investment account that's growing. Tech companies. I'm externally successful, high school friends, college friends, corporate friends, but I'm internally unfulfilled. Drinking too much and too often, not taking care of my health. Get in the car accident, boom, I flip the script. I go all the way past broke. I liquidate all my assets. I start my own company, Alan Lazaros LLC, what you'll never learn in school, but desperately need to know, desperately in all caps, which is the worst slogan ever if you're trying to do speeches at high schools and colleges, by the way. And I go past broke. I liquidate all my assets. Now I'm super fulfilled, happy, healthy, productive, fitness model, fitness competitor, fitness coach. Love my life, meaningful work. But now I'm unsuccessful externally. Yeah. Can't sustain it, which also sort of sucks. Yeah. The fourth bucket is where everyone wants to get. And this is the hardest one ever. The fourth bucket is you look in the mirror and you can authentically say, I am both externally successful and internally fulfilled, and I want my future to be an amplified version of what it already is. I've turned my passion into purpose into profit, and it's growing, not just now, but in the future. That is where we all want to get. And the truth is, success, I think, is actually pretty easy. Fulfillment is pretty easy. Doing them together feels nearly impossible. Mm-hmm. It took me 30 years to get to a place where I was able to do both in tandem. And the reason why that's so hard is because what's meaningful work for us is usually not what the economy pays a lot for. Not always, but usually. Yeah. And if you can find a way where your meaningful work with what you're good at, with what is meaningful, is also paid well, and you can build a career and a life and a business around that, I mean, you have what everyone wants, which is external success as well as internal fulfillment. And very few people have both, and that's now what I do for work. So that was, believe it or not, the mid version.
Yeah, next time, Gary, just say short. Next time, say short. No, that's fantastic. And even still, that when we were having a chance to chat off air, that there are still some parts of that's been left out. So we can keep the audience looking for a wee bit more for the next time that we chat. So, in terms of, there's two significant accidents that have obviously had a massive effect on your life. The first is your dad's passing, and the second is the enlightenment that you've gained and the insights that you gained from your own accident in terms of the changes that you made since, and then the ability to be able to be focused on and driven towards the life that you're leading now. What would you say? Obviously, you're very young. At the age of 2, so you don't have any real cognitive ability to be able to understand and process and such at that age. But what would you say are some of the most pivotal insights that you've gained now that you have an opportunity to reflect on the impact of both on your life?
Yeah, well, the first thing is nature and nurture, right? So a lot of my mannerisms, a lot of my jokes, a lot of my personality is very similar to apparently my father. Right. And my mom would say, oh, you said that just like your dad, and that kind of thing. So there's definitely a genetic component. And then if you study epigenetics, you can obviously improve and change and shift your genetics. However, there's definitely a genetic component that's within one lifetime very hard to shift a lot of. So for example, predisposition to alcohol with my Irish background. There are certain things about you and your essence and your natural inclinations that are strengths, and every strength comes with a weakness. So that's one of the insights that I've come with too. And so it's been really, really hard for me to unpack some of this stuff because a lot of times we don't want to look at the hard stuff. But my father was very clearly very confident, but also reckless. Right. And so what you need to do, and here's the problem, confidence and reckless often comes together. It's very hard to have ridiculously high confidence and simultaneous humility in the opposite direction. Yeah. if you want to be centered, if you have level 10 self-belief, you better have level 10 humility in tandem if you want to stay centered. Yeah. And so I'm really grateful that I've really sort of shifted and transformed a lot of what I learned. I'm epigenetically exposed to. And then on top of that, the nurture piece, I mean, looking back at your past and rewatching the movie of your own life, you really do start to understand, oh, okay, so I did become sort of a social coward. I used to call myself a chameleon. I used to be able to fit in with anyone. Mm. And so now I'm one of those engineers who actually does learn how to communicate effectively with everybody. And I end up in corporate as a product manager. A product manager, I always joke, you know, I remember my very first product manager role, I had the boss's boss said, oh, don't worry, we've got Alan. He's going to grow this to 120 million a year. And I remember thinking, I am in serious trouble. Yeah. We're going to go from 80 to 120 with this old product line. And I remember thinking, okay, so a product manager has all the responsibility and none of the authority. So yes. I got to talk to quality assurance. I got to talk to manufacturing. I got to talk to the marketers. I talk both marketing and engineer and business, all this stuff. And all the responsibility with none of the authority is a recipe for low self-worth, but also a recipe for learning how to be effective in communicating with all walks of life. Yeah. And so now I'm very grateful to be one of the few engineers who thinks as this mathematical semi-genius with metrics and habits and structures and systems, but also can communicate with regular people. And I don't mean regular people, with non-engineers. I don't mean regular people in a negative way. Most engineers can't talk and communicate effectively. I've coached many of them. They say, Alan, you're so good with women. How do you do it? All this stuff. I said, I don't think that, but thank you, I guess. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when you reflect on your past, it's going to give you insights about you that you can double down on to have a bigger, better, brighter future. Mm-hmm. And we all need to rewatch the movie of our own life. But you got to remember, no one likes to watch a movie that is both amazing and inspiring and wonderful, but also a nightmare. Yeah. And so you have to be able to watch both. And that's the problem, is we inflate, deflate, or omit. That's the three ways we lie to ourselves and lie to each other. So you got to make sure you objectively watch the movie of your own life and you don't omit the negative things that really help you understand the objective truth of what was. Because I think, I said this on a podcast earlier today, my new main thing that I'm going to focus on is accurate. They say truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. Accurate thinking will set you free. Right. Accurate thinking will set you free. But the problem is that's very hard because emotionally there's a lot of stuff we don't want to face that is objectively true. Yeah. Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible in terms of deep. And I love that, you know, the ability, you know, because often we'll exaggerate our role in our life. You know, whether we exaggerate our innocence or our victimhood or something in between, you know, depending on what narrative we are telling ourselves or other people at a given point in time. And you see it so often. And I think it really comes down to intention for me, you know, the intention of, you know, how honest and open do I genuinely want to be about who I am, what I've done, what I plan to do, what I can do about it, what I can't do about it, you know, the various different questions and such. And I think to just, you know, almost summarize what you were saying there, not everyone's willing to watch that movie. Not everyone even has the cognitive capacity to be able to sit down and understand what they're watching and why they're watching it and what they're actually going to do with that afterwards. You know, afterwards they'll just come out and go, cool, that was all right. Where are we going for a drink? You know, and then it's just kind of back to regular life again. So that introspection and intentional introspection to use that information for good is powerful and fairly underperformed, I would suggest, overall. I think that the self-belief piece, people used to say when I first got in the self-improvement space, they would say adversity is your advantage because it gives you the emotional muscle to go do extraordinary things that ordinary people can't do. Mm-hmm. And I resonated with that in the past, but then what I realized later on is that that's not true. Adversity is your advantage if you have high self-belief. In psychology, it's known as self-efficacy. So I always had, because people, my therapist, Carol, for example, I don't understand how you became this through that. Mm-hmm. And honestly, same. But I've started to understand why. It's so interesting because, one, I would say, and I used to be too much of a coward to share this, but I candor is my top core value. I'm an engineer. I'm going to tell the truth. I was always gifted.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to say that socially, but I think it does everyone a disservice to not say it. I always remember when I was a kid, it was like, why am I better than everybody at stuff? I don't understand why I'm so much smarter than everybody else. It doesn't make any sense to me. Mm-hmm. And when you are, the IQ tests or, and again, IQ, there's a lot of different types of intelligence. There's a book called The Multiple Intelligences. It breaks it down into 9 different categories. Mm-hmm. Kevin says you check too many boxes. That's the way he says it. People don't like you because you check too many boxes. Okay, fair. But I never felt like I fit in anywhere. And I now understand why, because I'm statistically so rare that I kind of am so different. And so if I look at the people I grew up with, why is it that they experienced some of the same traumas that I did, but they ended up reacting in very different ways? Why wasn't it aim higher, work harder, and get smarter for anyone else?
Yeah.
And the people who have high self-belief, they don't know that they do because everyone around them acts like they do. Mm. They're mirroring and matching them. People don't come up to you and say, dude, I really don't believe in myself like you do. No one ever said that. Yeah. And so I would look here and go, okay, now I'm 35, and I look back going, I thought you guys, why didn't you guys do what you said you'd do? And they're like, well, I thought you were just talking. It's like, no, I meant it. Like, I didn't say I'm going to be a successful podcaster and then like go to the beach. Yeah. I really meant what I said, and I reverse engineered it and all this stuff. But now you realize when you get older and you get more mature, oh, so other people really are just saying stuff. Mm. They're not actually calculating it. Got it. It's only the math engineers that are calculating it. And then the engineers struggle with courage. So, it's only the courageous engineers that do that and all this different stuff. So to make this relevant to everybody else, if you have high self-belief, adversity is your advantage. And then when you rewatch that movie of your own life, you will take things from it and then build a bigger, better, brighter future. But if you don't have self-belief, it's just going to be pain. Yeah. And if it's just pain, you're going to escape into drugs or alcohol or whatever. Insert vice here. Mm. So if you do have self-belief, you can build a bigger, better, brighter future, and you can become more virtuous and become better and get better, and you can take that and transform yourself. If you don't have self-belief, it's just going to be adversity. Adversity is not your advantage without self-belief. Without self-belief, your adversity is just adversity. And why would someone subject themselves to more pain and suffering if they don't believe it's for a greater purpose? Yeah. And without self-belief, it's not. It's just pain. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just going to do stuff. Do you know, one of the things that resonated with me there, Alan, was I was recently watching not an autobiography, but like a movie called Back to Black about Amy Winehouse, the singer. And I don't know how true this is or not, but I could imagine it would be true, where she says, I need to go through all of this hard stuff so that I can write about it so that people will buy my records. And her paradigm absolutely was, no one would be at all interested in me if I wasn't this train wreck of a human being that just goes from bad decision to bad decision to bad relationship to circumstances and alcoholism and various other things like that. And her anchor for her music was storytelling. It wasn't the trauma that people were buying, and it wasn't the devastation or the heartache or heartbreak. It was her ability to take a circumstance and tell a story to a very catchy tune, but she didn't have anyone in her life that was able to tell her that. And if you think about that, that's what resonated with me in terms of the adversity and using the adversity in conjunction with the self-belief. If she had that self-belief, she would have been able to say that was part of the story, and there's another part of the story now that isn't quite as traumatic but is equally as compelling and equally as inspiring and equally as consumable, if you want to put it in kind of commercial terms as such. Excellent, so in-depth conversation. I'm really interested to go back to the book by Bronnie Ware and the Tony Robbins TED Talk. Now, I did a tiny bit of research before before we joined the call today here, and I'm going to give people the 5 the top regrets of the dying, if that's okay.
Nice.
And then I'd love for you to tell me what was so impactful from that. So the 5, and this is from the Bronnie Ware website, so it's not just a Google search.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of paraphrase a wee bit here, but I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Number 2 was I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Number 4, I wish I had stayed in touch with friends. And number 5, I wish that I had let myself be happier. What was the real resonation for you in that book?
Yeah, so I actually have a flashcard here. It's all tattered and it's actually ripped in half now. I used to carry it with me everywhere. I still do, actually. It's usually in my office, but when I go out, I try to grab it. All 5 are on there, although you can barely read them. The one that resonated most with me, there's 2 on there that resonate a lot with me. The other one's not as much. And I actually got to interview Bronnie.
Oh, wow.
Which was awesome. This was 4 years after my car accident. It was really cool. I fanboyed hard on that interview. But I actually got to ask her, I said, do you think number 2 is because of number 1? I had the courage to actually ask that.
Yeah.
Because the number 2 is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And I said, because Bronnie, I love hard work. Now that I'm in alignment. Because the first one is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for... Because if I had stayed in corporate and done something out of alignment, I would regret all the hard work.
Yeah.
But I told Bronnie, I don't think I'm going to regret it now. I can tell that I'm going to regret it if I don't.
Yes.
Because now I'm in alignment. So she said, Alan, that makes a lot of sense. So that was cool. It was really cool. Yeah. The interview's on YouTube if anyone wants to see it. But anyways, the 2 that resonated most with me is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me.
Yeah.
That's the one that that's the one that resonated most back then. That's the one that I thought I struggled with most. And I did, because I was out of alignment for sure. And I think most of us, when we achieve goals that are outside of alignment with self-awareness, you're either not going to achieve it because you are not aware enough to realize that it's out of alignment with self-awareness.
Yeah.
Or you do achieve it and it's not fulfilling.
Yes.
Okay. So that's number 1. But here's the thing that I now realize resonates the most. I wish I had the courage to express my true feelings. I was such a coward. Here's the thing. I always joke. There's 2 types of people in this world. There's people who are fearful and there's liars. The problem is we're not afraid of the same things. And I learned this from Kev. So Kevin and I, we got together in business almost 8 years ago. And he has very low self-belief. He struggles with self-doubt. He's built a lot now, so he has a lot more self-efficacy now. And as he builds self-belief, he sees the whole world differently, by the way. So for those of you who struggle, there's so much that can happen. You can build self-belief. We can talk about how to build it if you want. We can build it. But anyways, so he would say, Alan, that's never going to land. That doesn't make any sense. Because I would say things like, because I didn't know people struggle with self-belief because I never struggled with it, so I didn't understand. And everyone acted like they didn't struggle with it either when they were around me, so I didn't get it. And now I understand. So I would say things like, well, I've never really not achieved a goal because I didn't think I could achieve it. I've only ever not achieved a goal because I decided I didn't want to. And Kev would be like, what? That sounds so arrogant. Mm-hmm. And while I don't think I'm going to win a strongman competition because I'm not naturally strong, there's very little that I don't feel like if I really worked hard and committed decades to it that I think most things are available to me. I now realize that that's because of genetic potential, quantum abilities, and tons of self-belief. And I also have a lot of grit and work ethic from having a atrocious childhood. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that back then. I didn't know the difference between me and other people. When you're young, there isn't that many differences. The differences aren't highlighted yet. When you get older and older and older, you realize, oh, okay, so this is what is happening. Yeah. And the difference is self-belief, self-worth, courage, all this stuff. So I think courage is 2 types. Kevin says this: you are afraid that all of you is not enough or that all of you is too much. I'm afraid that all of me is too much. So I was a social coward. Mm-hmm. Kevin and I would give a speech together. I would think I was going to crush it and everyone would hate me. And he would think he was going to suck and everyone would love him. And we were like, what is the deal? And I'm sitting there going, I'm a better speaker than you. What is the problem? I now realize I'm much less likable. And I talk and engineer. I talk in a modality of thinking that no one has. Not no one, but very few people. Right? Most people don't understand exponentials, and they don't think in exponentials, so they think I'm this weirdo. They also think I'm super arrogant, which I figured out why. If I have level 10 self-belief and only level 8 humility, I come off as level 2 arrogant.
Yeah.
I might be more humble than most people. You just can't tell because I have so much freaking self-belief.
Yeah.
And most people have very little self-belief and they pretend they have a lot, so it's this whole thing. Yeah. So my point is that everyone's fearful, but everyone's fearful of something different. My fear is social. I'm not concerned that I'm not going to be successful. Kevin is very concerned that he's not going to be successful, but he's not ever concerned about being disliked.
Yeah.
The dude's the most likable, relatable guy ever. So him and I are yin and yang, and we now understand, okay, so I was never socially accepted, so I became a social coward, but I feel very successful in external achievement. Yeah. You weren't thinking very well, and you didn't reverse engineer anything, and you didn't believe in yourself, so you're not sure, you have no certainty whatsoever that you're going to be externally successful, but yet socially you feel very competent. Yeah. Got it. So all of us struggle with either competence courage, which is how certain are you that you can reverse engineer a finish line and achieve an external outcome given enough time and effort. Yeah. If it's 10, you have level 10 self-belief. Congratulations, no one likes you. I'm kidding. All right, but seriously, you're weird and you usually hide it and you dim yourself down around other people because you make them insecure. The second one is social courage. These are the people who dial themselves down because they're too afraid. So Kevin needed competence, courage, external achievement, resume, cover letter, apply to the job, do the thing. I needed social courage. Yeah. And social courage is nothing more or less than what do you actually think? What do you actually believe? And having the courage to actually say it. Mm-hmm. Now, this is really scary because when you're young and you're an engineer and a girl says, hey, how do I look in this? Do I look fat in this? And you say yes at level 6 out of 10, that ruins you. And you realize, wait a minute, it's not safe to be honest. So I'm not trying to be unkind. You just do kind of look that way. And so when you're young, you realize, okay, it's not safe to be smarter than. It's not safe to think in numbers. It's not safe to tell the truth. So what do? You inflate, deflate, or omit. You start lying socially to try to be accepted. And then you aren't authentic. And then people sense that you're not authentic, but they don't know why. And then it's this whole thing. So being yourself, your true self, good, bad, ugly, less than, more than, I don't care. Big fish, small pond, small minnow, huge ocean. Be who you are. When you are a statistical anomaly, it's scary. It's scary to stand out. Mm-hmm. It's scary to be the only one in the room who really does have big goals and dreams. Because you do, you get shit on. Mm-hmm. And so what do? Behind the scenes, you work harder, aim higher, get smarter, but then when you're around other people, you kind of dim your light. You pretend, oh no, no, and you just try to fit in. And if you do that, you're going to rip yourself in two instead of actually be who you really are. And so if you're out there and you struggle with self-belief, you can build it. You got to start small and actually build it. You got to state, prove, self-assign. It's a formula. You got to state, here's what I'm going to do. You got to actually follow through and do it. Keep the promises you make to yourself, and then self-assign it once you do it. If you struggle with social courage, you need self-worth. You need to learn how to speak up for yourself, set and honor clear boundaries. You need to learn how to share what you actually think. And I know that sounds simple, but it's ridiculously difficult. I mean, half the stuff I shared on this podcast, I could not share in my 20s.
Yeah. What incredible growth. So like, in terms of your commitment to self-improvement, obviously we've talked about some of the catalysts in terms of your childhood and the accidents and the information you consumed afterwards. Like what were the literal first steps that you took on that journey? It's almost, you've explained it there in terms of starting small and making a commitment to yourself, following through, and then giving it back to yourself. Like what were the first steps, and what challenges did you face initially?
The first thing that I think we all need to face, particularly if you are an entrepreneur, And by the way, unless you have to be an entrepreneur, just don't do it. It is absolutely atrocious, despite what Instagram says. I have an 18-person team. I've got 3 businesses between the two of Emilio and I. And if you're trying to start a business to have free time, don't do it. It's a terrible idea. That's not true. If you really can't work for someone else, you are an entrepreneur and you got to do it. It is what it is. And get a business partner who complements you. And that's a whole nother conversation. But to answer your original question, what I had to realize is that I actually didn't have as much self-discipline as I thought.
Right.
I had a lot of discipline when it came to, so for example, when you go to school and the bell rings, you got to be in class, otherwise you get detention. Yeah. You got to go to school because it's the law. You got to go to college and you got to show up, otherwise you get an F. And then you fail the class and then you waste the money. There's external consequences to not showing up. And so when I first became sort of on my own, I realized I don't have as much self-discipline as I thought. I was very disciplined in achievement and external achievements that were congruent with social status and or success. Yeah. But I didn't have a lot of self-discipline. So I bought this little productivity planner. And after that, I eventually started these little black notebooks. I've got them actually in the corner of my office where I started habit tracking. Right. And most people who transition from corporate to entrepreneur, they realize very quickly, holy crap, I'm actually not that disciplined when I don't have someone looking over my shoulder.
Yes.
It's a very hard realization. I was already on the high end of self-discipline, and I still was like, holy crap. I have a whole day to just work on me and my business, and I can't seem to force myself to do these things. Yeah. And then you build it. You slowly build it. You keep the promises you make to yourself. So what I often say is if you had a friend who broke as many promises to you as you've broken to yourself, how much would you value that friendship? Yeah. And the truth is you wouldn't. And so that's low self-worth. Most people have low self-worth and they pretend it's high when they're socially. And no one wants anyone to find out that deep down when they're behind the scenes by themselves that they actually don't like themselves very much. It's a very vulnerable thing. And so if you really want to start liking and loving yourself, what real self-love is actually keeping the promises you make to yourself. Why would you renovate a home that you didn't believe was of value? Why would you redo the kitchen and do the landscaping and renovate the deck if you didn't believe the home was of value? Yeah. So self-development, self-discipline, self-improvement needs to be the foundation that everything is built upon. Yeah. If you really value yourself, you'll get good sleep. You'll exercise consistently. You'll hydrate consistently. You'll take care of the asset. This is the asset. Yeah. Your whole life is built on right here, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And if you don't invest in that, that's like Apple being like, you know what, the iPhone, we had a good run, but I don't really want to work on it anymore. We're good now. We're good. Just let it ride. No, the iPhone 16 is 100,000 times more capable than the very first iPhone that came out in 2007. Yeah. So Allen 3.6 needs to be bigger, better, and brighter than Allen 3.5. But that's not going to happen unless I can discipline myself. No one's going to come and say, Alan, get to the gym. Yeah. Alan, make sure you do your reading. Alan, make sure you weigh yourself, right? So I started habit tracking. Mm-hmm. Habit tracking is the best tool in the entire game, which is very simple. Clients come to me. What are your goals? Okay. What are the metrics and habits that need to be tracked in order to achieve those goals? What are the skills you need to develop in order to achieve those goals? And then the rest is identity. Yeah. The rest is the inner work, courage, everything we've talked about. So metrics and habits, I have something called peak performance tracking. We call it PPT with TPO, total productive output, all these weird acronyms. But ultimately it's crazy. I started in these little black notebooks almost 10 years ago, and now I have hundreds of people tracking habits. Everyone on our team tracks habits. Every one of my clients tracks habits. I work directly and indirectly with 61 different podcasters. Mm-hmm. And I do it in Google Sheets. And you can set it up. The date is on the far left. Here's your metrics, and then here's your habits, and then you can calculate. There's a percentage. Yeah. So it's a 1 green check mark for a 1. 0.5 is yellow. It's like I kind of did it, and then a 0 is red. Yeah. And you just track habits each day. Here's what you said you wanted to do. Here's what you actually did. And so I developed self-discipline through tracking habits consistently over time. And I've been consistently habit tracking now for 10 years. And I'm telling you, if you're successful by drifting around, you can't imagine how successful you're going to be when you actually get on track. So this is what I say to my clients. I say, goal 1, set up the train tracks. Goal 2, stay on the train tracks. Goal 3, never, ever, ever, ever lose momentum.
Yeah.
And then goal 4, improve the train tracks. So you got to improve not only your execution of the system, but also the system itself. And again, I'm an engineer, so if all that sounds exhausting, it is, but it works. I promise you. Imagine having mathematical certainty that you're going to achieve your dreams.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, in terms of a little bit of a tip of the hat to history, I asked Kevin this question when he was on the previous pod. So, how does the heart-driven, no BS approach to success and fulfillment guide your work and your life choices?
So because I got to be on a coaching session in 2 minutes, but thank you so much. I start with gratitude, end with gratitude. Thank you so much, Gary, for having me. I'll end on this answer, and I'll give you the shortest possible version. The heart-driven is my intention is to, and I say this to my clients, my intention is to push you out of your comfort zone and to push you towards your potential, but not to push you out of integrity.
Yeah.
That's the heart-driven. The no BS, I mean, listen, people don't achieve their goals because they think inaccurately. There's perception and then there's reality. And I'm an engineer. Reality is critical. If there's a self-driving car that thinks there's a road to the right and it's actually a cliff, the car is going to keep driving off a cliff and then blaming the world or blaming the government or blaming themselves. When in reality, the actual root cause of the issue is just inaccurate thinking. Mm-hmm. Most of us think inaccurately, including me. Mm-hmm. I just think less inaccurately than I used to.
Yeah.
And so inaccurate thinking is the cause of most human suffering. And accurate thinking will change your life and will free you, you know. So that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent, thank you. And what I'll do in terms of managing your time, I'll put in the details of where people can find you in the blurb. And great to see you again. Thank you very much for taking the time. I've learned a lot. I had a great time today, Alan. All the very best to you, my friend.
Gary, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's awesome. And be the best you, everybody. Be the best you.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.